Chris Doumitt just broke the silence, and what he revealed makes every gold haul Parker ever broadcast look small. Viewers always assumed the biggest discoveries made it on camera, but they didn't. According to Chris, entire nights, finds, and events were never shown, on purpose, and the footage he saved wasn't cut for time or buried in storage. Parker himself told him to hide it. This isn't rumor. This isn't fan speculation. This is Chris, speaking for the first time. And what he brings forward changes everything fans believed about the claim, the show, and Parker's real motives. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a surprise stash. It was proof that the land had been shaped, built almost, to guard gold for decades. Season 16 didn't just reveal value, it exposed control. And once a system like that comes to light, nothing about how this operation works can remain the same. They never intended those figures to be compared. And before we go any further, hit like and subscribe, because once you understand what Season 16 quietly uncovered, Gold Rush will never look familiar again. What seemed like an ordinary clean-up early in the season didn't look dramatic on screen. No screaming, no blown hoses, no chaos. Just Chris Doumitt standing over the sluice boxes, doing what he's done, longer than nearly anyone. Reading gold. But the totals coming from those cleanups refused to behave. They didn't match the cut maps. They didn't line up with depletion models. They didn't follow the history of that ground. The numbers weren't swinging wildly or dropping off. They stayed heavy, steady gold in zones that should have died out weeks before. Places labeled, stripped, finished, empty, areas that on paper were mined out years ago. Yet the gold wasn't fading. If anything, it was getting stronger. The deeper they chased the cuts into supposedly dead dirt, the richer the material became. That's backward. Placer Gold doesn't do that. At first, Chris stays quiet. He jots a note here, a comparison there. He treats it as a fluke, because experience teaches you to do exactly that. Yukon ground is unpredictable. False bottoms exist. Missed sections happen. One weird cleanup doesn't mean anything. Production shrugs, lucky day, move on. Except it keeps happening. Another cut, then another, different locations, same behavior. Gold per yard stays level. Grain size stays the same. No tapering, no exhaustion. The numbers refuse to fall off the way every Yukon channel eventually does. And that's when it stops feeling random. Once a pattern repeats, chance leaves the room. Chris isn't seeing a streak. He's seeing a system acting like it's being fed, or more accurately, like it never ran out. That's when the old maps come out. Legacy claim maps are merciless documents. They don't exaggerate. They don't flatter. They expose everything. Where the early miners dug, where modern crews stripped, and where ground was declared worthless. The sections now producing gold are clearly labeled as drained, cut through, mined out, done. According to the records, any leftover gold should be microscopic dust, not repeatable weight. But when Chris lays the current recovery data over those maps, the contradiction explodes off the page. The pay streaks aren't continuing. They're expanding. They drift outside the known channel, up, down, sideways. The geometry is wrong. Natural placer channels follow gravity and water flow. These streaks twist, break, pause, restart. The picture stops looking geological. If erosion caused this, the gold would thin out, grain size would shrink, travel marks would show distance, but none of that is happening. The evidence doesn't point to movement, it points to placement. The channel isn't wandering, it's compartmentalized, as if someone separated it on purpose long ago, keeping the gold from collecting in one detectable area. That's where the unsettling thought appears. Someone redirected it. Not recently. Not with modern tools. This isn't sloppy work or reclaiming errors. The scale is far bigger and far older. Whatever reshaped this system existed before these maps, before organized claims, before crews arrived with GPS and drones. And Season 16 is exposing its edges by accident. By the third week of tracking the pattern, Chris stops treating it as coincidence. He starts treating it as proof. He studies more than total weight. He studies the gold itself. Gold tells its history if you know how to read it. Sharp edges mean short travel. Rounded edges mean distance. Mixed sizes mean reworked ground. But this gold is identical, day after day, cut after cut. Same shape, same size, same wear. In a natural placer system, that consistency shouldn't exist. Rich ground always breaks down over time. First the biggest pieces, then the leftovers, then the fines. But here, nothing is tapering off. Nothing is degrading. It feels like they're accessing sealed layers that were never touched, never stirred. When Chris examines grain patterns under magnification, the truth locks in. This gold didn't travel. It didn't wash downstream. It settled and stayed, protected, preserved. This isn't gold that drifted into a trap. It's gold that was held in place. And that realization changes the meaning of the entire season. This isn't a strike, not a pocket, not a hot run. Those things vanish fast. What Season 16 is brushing up against is bigger, older, and engineered to last. A preserved network, built to survive surface mining, modern extraction, and decades of pressure without ever revealing itself. The most chilling part isn't how much gold is showing up, it's how much clearly hasn't. Once you recognize a system like this, every number stops looking like a result and starts looking like a signal. The scale is too large, too structured, too deliberate. Suddenly, some numbers stop appearing on camera, not because they're unimportant, but because they're too important. Recovery ratios, once explained in detail, turn vague. Totals that used to be shown openly become brushed aside. Season 16 isn't uncovering a lucky streak, it's uncovering a hidden system, and it changes everything. A simple line on camera, good day, solid cleanup. But the real math behind those words never makes it onto the episode. The numbers that would show the true scale of what's happening, they're kept off screen. While the operation quietly shifts gears, Chris spots the change instantly. Raw totals aren't being talked about at the wash plant anymore. Instead of entering the logs in real time, they're held back, sometimes for days, sometimes until after the ground has already been filled in again. The gold still gets weighed, still gets recorded, but the process moves away from the cameras. Transparency turns selective. And this isn't about shaping a storyline, it's about control. The reason? Scale. Once numbers get too big, they stop being fun facts for the audience and start becoming problems, drawing attention not just from viewers, but from claim holders, partners, regulators, and potential rivals. The show doesn't want to explain how one stretch of ground is beating the historical record, so it doesn't. It compresses the timeline. It strips away context. Data becomes story beats instead of proof. Chris knows exactly what that means. They're not covering up a mistake. They're covering up the size of the discovery, a size that can't be walked back once the public sees it. Because if fans can notice the pattern, so can people with legal power. And that's when the physical work on site starts to shift. As the cuts run deeper, a new pattern appears, one you only see when you stop chasing totals and start following depth. The gold spikes aren't random. They show up at repeated intervals, roughly every 90 feet, not side to side, but straight down. Each time the crew breaks through another clay layer, the cycle repeats, a jump in weight, a period of steady recovery, and then another surge at the next clay break. Nature doesn't organize gold like that. Water doesn't deposit gold in neat, repeating layers separated by clay unless something else interrupts the process. These aren't stacked flood deposits. The spacing is too exact, too intentional. It looks like storage, not sedimentation. Chris checks multiple cuts across multiple weeks all over the claim. Same depths, same jumps, same steady hold. The clay isn't just a barrier, it's a lid. And the gold beneath those lids isn't spread thin, like it would be under natural pressure. It's concentrated, clean, untouched, almost preserved, as if the layers weren't geological accidents, but checkpoints. The word starts circulating quietly, not spoken directly, just understood. Each clay break isn't just a boundary, it's a marker, a deliberate stop in movement. Whoever worked this ground long before mapped a system that wasn't designed to pull everything at once, but to protect what remained. Not extraction, preservation. Long-term access, not a one-time hit. The idea is staggering. It suggests the best gold wasn't meant to be recovered quickly. It was shielded from erosion, from theft, from future miners who didn't understand the system. The treasure wasn't buried deep. It was buried smart, layered behind natural defenses. Modern miners barely notice, because modern mining assumes gold fades downward, not in stages. Once Chris understands that, everything about his approach shifts. Earlier in the season, he pushed back, questioned, pointed out inconsistencies. Now he doesn't argue at all, not because the evidence vanished, but because it matters too much. Suddenly, lease terms feel heavier. Claim boundaries stop being lines on paper and start looking like fault lines. A fine this large, if acknowledged, could trigger contract changes, audits, even outside interference. Speaking out doesn't just threaten an episode, it threatens ownership. Because once a system this well preserved is officially recognized, it stops being just a good season. It becomes a claim worth fighting over. Partners renegotiate. Landowners want answers. Lawyers show up. Production schedules crumble. So the operation adapts. Quietly, the show continues. The edits get tighter. The gold gets pulled slowly and carefully. Keeping the story small keeps the system safe. The worst thing they could do now is broadcast proof that this ground is rewriting every mining model in the region. Because the moment that proof becomes obvious, control leaves the hands of the people who actually dug it up. And that's where the math becomes unavoidable. To understand the system without exposing it, Chris breaks the claim down to reference points. Wall structures, density consistency, and repeating depth markers. With just the material already exposed, he calculates volume. No speculation, no guesswork, just confirmed data spread across width and depth. Even that limited figure beats most full-season totals. And when he adds in the sealed layers below, layers untouched by current excavation, the scale becomes undeniable. Modern mining doesn't cut straight down. It steps deeper, year by year. In this case, that means vast sections of the preserved structure below the current working depth are still intact. Chris factors that in, using conservative numbers. Worst case, low recovery. The total still breaks the 100 million mark, and that's when the conversation stops being theory. More aggressive calculations, assuming the full structure holds across the claim, push the number to nearly $195 million in recoverable gold. Not dream math, not promotion, just volume multiplied by consistency. And that's exactly why nobody wants that calculation on record, because once those numbers enter the conversation, Season 16 stops being a strong year. It becomes evidence, evidence that the system isn't random. It's organized, protected, and bigger than anyone admitted. After that, the site behavior changes overnight. Machines move differently. Cuts that should go deeper suddenly freeze. Instead of driving headfirst into the richest zones, new cuts appear at the outer edges. Light passes replace aggressive digging. The team moves Earth gently. Totals slow down, but efficiency improves. Gold per yard climbs even as yardage shrinks. From the outside, it looks like hesitation. In reality, it's strategy. They're not trying to rip out every ounce right now. They're trying to avoid damaging the structure that makes this find extraordinary. Heavy stripping risks collapsing the clay seals. Going too deep too fast risks mixing layers that were meant to stay separate. And once those layers blend, the system loses its advantage, so they mine around it, protecting the structure, preserving the map. The richest zones stay partially untouched, while the margins get cleared. That keeps the system legible, stable, and under control. The goal isn't speed, it's longevity. What viewers see as restraint is actually investment. The crew isn't behaving like miners on a schedule anymore. They're acting like caretakers guarding a resource, and that brings the past back into focus. Chris recognizes the pattern instantly because he's seen echoes of it before. In old Yukon mining techniques, most modern crews dismiss as outdated. Methods built for sustained recovery, not quick wins. Early miners didn't always take everything. They diverted, sealed, staged, and returned years later. Their goal wasn't seasonal success. It was continuity. Their systems weren't primitive. They were deliberate. The same logic exists here. Layered access, structural breaks, long-term protection. This ground wasn't simply dug, it was designed. Not for speed, for survival. And now, as Season 16 unfolds, that ancient strategy is resurfacing and reshaping the entire operation in real time. This preserved system isn't luck, and it isn't nature playing tricks. It's the result of choices made long before there were contracts, cameras, machinery, or schedules. Season 16 didn't reveal gold. It revealed purpose. And once that purpose becomes visible, every move on the claim shifts. Because when you understand you're standing on a design meant to survive decades, you stop rushing like the clock is running out. Chris knows observation by itself won't cut it anymore. A theory, no matter how convincing, needs proof. And that proof doesn't come from a massive cleanup or a game-changing cut. It comes from something much smaller. A controlled probe, just deep enough to verify the truth without disturbing the structure around it. When the sample finally comes up, Chris doesn't need to run a full wash to understand what he's holding. The pay is pure, undisturbed, identical in grain size, identical in weight, identical in wear to every piece already recovered, only without a single marker of movement or mixing. That's the detail that confirms everything. If this layer had ever been touched, even once, the gold would show it. The edges would round off, fines would dominate, density would fall. None of that is present. The material stayed exactly where it was placed, sealed under the same clay caps that defined every previous spike. No bleed-through, no collapse, no contamination. The boundary worked. The system isn't weakened. It isn't partially stripped. It isn't fading. It's whole. And that realization forces a total shift in perspective. Everything pulled up to this point stops looking like production numbers and starts looking like sampling, evidence that the network is functioning exactly the way it was engineered to. The real reserves, the foundation of this structure's value, are still untouched. Once that truth settles in, the pace of the operation becomes irrelevant to anyone watching from the outside. Precision becomes the only metric that matters. Season 17 won't present itself as a leap forward in spectacle. It'll feel slower, fewer huge reveals, fewer towering cleanups, less shouting, less urgency. But under that calm exterior, something much bigger will be taking shape. Yield per yard will rise even as the total yards mined fall. Data will take priority over velocity. Every cut turns into a test. Every pass becomes a measurement. Instead of forcing the ground to respond, the crew studies how the system reacts. Risk management replaces aggressive output. Errors that might cost ounces in an ordinary season could cost millions here. The real work won't happen in dramatic swings of machinery. It will happen in hesitation, analysis, restraint, in all the decisions not to dig. To outsiders, it may look like the operation is pulling back, slowing down, losing momentum. But the opposite is true. The crew has passed the stage where gold itself is the objective. Now the objective is control. Control over access, control over timing, control over information. Because once a preserved system like this becomes openly acknowledged, it stops being just a mining achievement. It becomes leverage. Whoever understands how it works controls how it's used and when. Season 16 was never about maximizing ounces. It was about proving the structure had survived long enough to matter. And that's the realization that finally settles over Chris. This isn't a lottery win to cash in all at once. It's a mechanism built to outlive any single miner, crew, lease, or season. The value isn't just in what gets hauled out. It's in knowing how to pull it without destroying the architecture that protects it. Season 16 wasn't the reward. It was the signal, the first flash that something extraordinary sits beneath the surface, arranged in a way that rewards patience and punishes haste. The true extraction hasn't started, and it doesn't need to. Not yet. But now that the evidence is undeniable, the conditions that kept this system hidden won't last forever. Information changes strategy. Strategy changes results. And once enough people realize what this ground really represents, everything operating above it will have to evolve. Because systems like this don't just redefine a season. They redefine who ends up in control of it.